Alrighty, so this is going to be the last video that I'm going to be recorded from home, at least for a week, because I'm going to be going down to South Florida for a week, and that means that there's going to be a lot of recording that is going to be on the road from the hotel from now, especially starting tomorrow. I'll do my first video on the road from the hotel in terms of talking about the matinee games, because as I mentioned before, it is always tough when it comes to me trying to keep up MLS game while I'm on the road. Though I know for sure that the first two game I can definitely watch it. The first game I can definitely watch it on the plane, and then the second one I'll basically watch it as the plane is landing in Miami and basically make my way to the hotel as well. I'll be listening to this game as well. But anyway, let's talk about this match week. We got 15 games once again. Last I checked, there was no game that was postponed because of weather, unlike last week where we had one game that was postponed because of weather. We got two Saturday matinee game and then bunch of Saturday night game with free triple header Sunday game that's gonna happen as well. And let's begin with the first of the Saturday matinee game, which is Toronto FC versus the New York Red Bulls. So this is the first of 9 games that Toronto FC is going to be at home. They have a long home stretch to start the season. Well, I wouldn't say start the season, but really in the midst of the schedule, because seem like they've already been preparing in terms of the World Cup. So yeah, they decided to have all these games that's going to be taking place right now, and we'll see how Toronto, of course, can take advantage of it. And their first opponent in this 9 game home stretch will be against the New York Red Bulls, who are fresh off of a loss last week against another Canadian team, and a shocking loss as well against CF Montreal, and their record is 2-0-1. Where Toronto, they got a win against FC Cincinnati on the road, so it was kind of a turn of fortune for both of these teams in terms of how last week gone, and kind of unexpected result in the opposite end. Whereas Toronto was not expected to beat Cincinnati on the road. The Red Bulls also weren't expected to lose at home against Montreal, which was easily one of the worst team in the league, at least for the first 2 weeks. All-time meeting 21-11-6 in favor of the New York Red Bulls. So yeah, the Red Bulls have kind of owned Toronto. Toronto has had their issue in terms of beating the Red Bulls in this one. So yeah, this should be interesting to see how it's going to be. For the Red Bulls, obviously they want to bounce back after last week. I think that was kind of almost like a warning sign. The fact that as much as I praise Michael Bradley decided to play his kids in terms of the first 3 games, there's going to be times where there could be some inconsistency as well. And facing against this TFC side, that this could potentially be the debut of Josh Sargent as well. We don't know exactly if he's going to play the full 90 minutes, but I think TFC fans are very excited to finally got their multi-million-dollar man on the field, and he's definitely going to help a lot, at least on the attacking end. Now, moving on, we got Atlanta United versus the Philadelphia Union. So I remember this was a matchup that was a must-watch TV a couple of years ago. Remember when both of these teams were really good, and it was a feisty kind of affair, especially when we saw it in a CONCACAF Champions Cup matchup as well? Yeah, we are far from those days. Both of these teams are still looking for their first win of the season. Both of them lost all 3 of their first 3 games of an 0-3 record. This game starts at 3:15 p.m. Eastern, 12:15 p.m. Pacific, and this game is actually also going to be on Big Fox as well. So yeah, I'm pretty sure Big Fox is probably very upset that this is the matchup that they of course got. They thought that this was going to be a very interesting matchup, and instead it's featured 2 teams that not only are looking for their first win of the season, but are looking for their first point of the season as well. And in terms of the all-time meetings, 7-7-5 in favor of the Philadelphia Union. And it's also important to note that the Union, of course, do have an away leg against Club America down in Mexico in just a couple of days. And I'm going to be reiterating with, about all of these teams that's going to be involving CONCACAF Champions Cup in the middle of the week, how some of these teams might be resting some of their guys, especially for some vital game. We'll see whether or not if Bradley Carnell might elect to do that, knowing that he needs all the manpower that he can get to overcome that 1-0 deficit that they suffer at home against Club America. But if that, of course, is the case, this might be a chance for Atlanta to get something going. I mean, the last game, that was probably by far the best game that they play, and that's saying something because they lost that one, and their defense was absolutely horrendous. But they show some life on the attacking end, and that's probably the best thing, considering that when you look at the first 2 games, they haven't really shown life on either on the attack or the defensive end whatsoever. Now, moving on, we got Columbus versus Nashville SC. So this game is also going to be on the Fox Network. Instead, it's going to be on FS1. Columbus 0-2 and 1, still looking for their first win under the Henrik Reichstrom era, as they face against a Nashville team that is 2-1 and 0, as this games will start at 6:15 p.m. Eastern, 3:15 p.m. Pacific. All-time meaning 4-4 and 3 in favor of the Columbus Crew. And knowing that Nashville, of course, still have that big matchup on the road against Inter Miami in the middle of the week, I do think that BJ Callahan will probably rest some of these guys. I mean, I know he probably won't admit it, and I know he's been playing most of his starters in these league play, even with CONCACAF Champions Cup commitment. But I do think that he's probably going to rest some of it. His guy, he need all the manpower that he can to be ready for that big showdown and that decisive second leg in the game between Inter Miami and Nashville, which I'm very excited to watch that one because I'm going to be attending in person. That should be a heck of a game and a matchup that I've even said that was probably the best matchup that we get in terms of the round of 16. And this is no disrespect to Seattle versus Vancouver, but Nashville and Miami, those are two teams that I wouldn't be surprised it might even be a preview of the Eastern Conference Final. That's how good both of these team could be heading into this season. And Nashville has been kind of a team that has looked every bit as I expected this season. This looked like it could be a dark not only a dark horse team, but this is probably going to be the most likely team that I think can take down the bad and evil known as Inter Miami. But before that, they have to face against Columbus. Columbus desperately need a win in this one, and they just desperately need to find some balance in this team. And, last game, the good news is their defense was much better compared to their first two games, but that also means that the attack didn't get going, and you wonder how much is that because of the fact they were being a little bit more defensive, but it sacrificed a lot of the attack. That's going to be something that Henrik Reichstrom will have to balance coming into this game against a red hot Nashville team. Now, moving on, we got Orlando versus Montreal. So this, of course, is the first game that Orlando is not going to have Oscar Pereira in charge. As I mentioned in the middle of the week, they elected to fire Oscar Pereira after just 3 games into the season. It's the quickest I've ever seen an MLS team fire their head coach to begin the season. So we'll see whether or not if they can maybe get a new interim head coach boost in this one against a Montreal team that got a very surprising win against the New York Red Bulls on the road, and they have a 1-0 in two record. All time meaning 10-7 and 10 is the all time record as well, as this is the first of 3 games that start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. So, yeah, it should be very interesting to see. Again, if Orlando can get something going, then maybe that has a lot to do with the fact that it's kind of what we thought was coming with the way that Oscar Pereira, as good as he's been during his time with Orlando City, the time was running out for him. Like his message and tactics have really gone stale. And I do applaud the fact that Orlando City decided to make that decision. Usually we don't see teams make that decision this early into the season, even though this is a continuation of last season collapse as well. But yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can really rally around their interim head coach and get that boost as we usually see teams do after a head coach being fired, or the fact that Montreal, they play very well, very surprisingly against the New York Red Bulls last week. We'll see whether or not if that was just a mirage or the fact that maybe this team might not be as bad as I thought would be after the first 2 games of the season. Now, moving on, we got NYCFC versus the Colorado Rapids. So, what a week it's been. I mean, one week we had the New York Red Bulls being at the top of the Eastern Conference, and now NYCFC is at the top of the Eastern Conference with a 2-1-0 record. They face against a Rapids team that is definitely rejuvenated after those 2 home wins that they had, and their attack looked like is going on all cylinder with a 2-0-1 record. This game starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, as I said. All-time meeting 3-3-1 in favor of NYCFC as well. So yeah, should be very fascinating to see how this game is. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not if the Rapids can continue that good form. I mean, playing at home, that's definitely not surprised to see how good they were, especially playing on the road against Colorado is always going to be tough because of the altitude. But now on the road, it'll be very interesting to see how they do, and especially we always talk about NYCFC, a team that always have a great home record, and a big part of it, just like what I said about Colorado have the advantage of the altitude. NYCFC has the advantage of playing at a baseball stadium and the dimension that kind of work in favor of them. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can get another big win in this one. Especially, we'll see whether be a theme of last season, where whenever they face against some good team at home, they tend out to win the game. And Colorado have definitely been a good team so far to begin the season, and we'll see whether or not if that trend continue. And then last but not least, the last game that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific is none other than Charlotte versus Inter Miami. Now, obviously, I know though I said about Nashville maybe resting some of their guys. I doubt Miami is probably going to do that, especially, I'm pretty sure Charlotte fans will not be very happy, or at least some of the Fairweather fan that bought tickets to this game will not be happy to see that Messi does not play in this one. And I believe they actually decided to only open the lower bowl. They decided not to go full bowl in this game, which is a little bit surprising. I thought the demand could have definitely been there, and we could have had the fourth consecutive week where we see Inter Miami play in a big stadium to start. But yeah, Charlotte with a 1-1-1 record, Inter Miami with 2-0-1 record, all-time meaning 4-2-3 in favor of Inter Miami. And if you remember last year when both of these teams played against each other at Bank of America Stadium, this was probably the best win that Charlotte FC not only had last season, but probably in franchise history. The fact that they absolutely manhandled Inter Miami in that game in front of that sold-out crowd. Yeah, we'll see whether or not if that can happen in this one, especially, it seems like this is a team that's probably going to be relying on the home form a lot, as we usually see. Charlotte tends to be a much better team at home than they are on the road, and they're facing against a Miami team that, again, I don't know if they're gonna rest their player. I don't know if Javier Mascherano really wants to do that. He's always gonna try to start his strongest team, but he also knows that that big game against Nashville SC in the middle of the week, he needs all the manpower that he needs in that one as well. So interesting to see how he play this one against Charlotte FC. Now, moving on to the 8:30 p.m. Eastern start. There's also three of them that starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Starting off with the Houston Dynamo versus the Portland Timbers. So, dare I say, this might be a game that might be a desperation derby when it comes to the coaches, because I do think that, when you look at these two head coaches, the seats are definitely starting to get warm for both of these head coaches, especially for Phil Neville, as I mentioned after the video talk about the firing of Oscar Pereira. It seems like he might be next in line, especially of how things have not gone the way the Portland Timbers won. With 1-0-2 record against a Houston Dynamo team that have a 1-0-1 record. All-time meeting 11-9 and 10 in favor of the Portland Timbers. So yeah, again, we'll see how this game, of course, will turn out. We'll see which head coach really wants to win this one to at least have a little bit of job security, because both of these head coaches, again, the seat is definitely started to warm up. And in the case, I think for Phil Neville, it's probably already warmed to a level that he is definitely feeling the heat after the first three games of the season. I know they won their opening night matchup, but if it wasn't for a 90th minute winner that they had against Columbus, this team would be 0-3 to start the season, or at least 0-1-2 to start the season. That is, and that defense has just been absolutely atrocious to start the season so far. Now, moving a little bit up north to Texas, we got FC Dallas versus San Diego. So this game starts at the same time, and this is another one of those situations where if you're San Diego and if you're Mikey Veras, I'm pretty sure he's probably going to be resting some of his guys. And the good thing about San Diego, because of how deep they are, he can afford to try to change the team a little bit to be able to not really lose too much quality coming in to this one against a Dallas team that have a 1-1-1 record. But despite the record, Dallas has actually played relatively well so far to begin the season. I thought they looked really good against LAFC, even in the loss as well. And this secretly is one of those matchups where I think of all the marquee matchup we talk about, this one might be flying under the radar itself. But in terms of the all-time meeting, San Diego has won both of the meeting against FC Dallas. In fact, yeah, Dallas fans do not want to remember what happened when they played San Diego last year, where one of the meeting was a 5-0 thumbing that San Diego gave to FC Dallas as well. And there's no doubt, I don't think it's going to be like this. I don't think San Diego is going to absolutely thump Dallas, considered this is a much Dallas team compared to that night when they got thumped 5-0. Though it will be very interesting to see how this, of course, will go, and especially for Mikey Veras. I know he has one eye in terms of the Toluca game as well, and how big of a challenge that would be. Not only have to go down to Mexico, but have to go into altitude as well to hold on to the 3-2 advantage, and not to mention not having his best defender as well. That's kind of the thing where I also think that as much as he maybe rest some of his guys, I wouldn't be surprised he might put Ingvartsen and Dua both in this game because both of them are not going to be available to play in that second leg because of the red card that they received in the first leg against Toluca. Now, moving on, we got Chicago versus DC United. So Chicago won 1-1, whereas DC United is 1-0-2. All-time meaning 11, 14, and 10 in favor of DC United. I would say that, if you want to say the word mid to describe a team to begin the first three games of the season, both of these teams is the definition of mid. It hasn't been great, but it also hasn't been bad whatsoever. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if either of these teams can snap out of that mid kind of a tier. In fact, if I was going to do an emotion index after 3 weeks, I would have definitely put both of these teams in the middle of the tier because it is the definition of how their start has been. It's been an okay start, but it hasn't been the one that we expected to as well. Now, moving on, we got RSL versus Austin FC. So this is first of two games that start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, which is kind of odd because usually with a 9:30 p.m. Eastern start, you would see Colorado being in there as part of the two game. But no, there's going to be one West Coast team that's going to be playing an hour earlier. But first, RSL with a 2-0-1 record. It's safe to say that the Kids is all right for RSL right now. I mean, the kids moving. They're basically like the New York Red Bulls of the Western Conference this season so far. With the Red Bulls playing a lot of their young guys. Same with RSL and having a lot of success with a 2-0-1 record against an Austin team that, just like Chicago and DC, they're kind of a definition of mid as well. It's been an okay start to the season, but it hasn't been the greatest start with a 1-1-1 record. All-time meaning 5-3 in favor of RSL. And again, with RSL, just like what I said about the New York Red Bulls, as much as I applaud them in terms of continue to play some of their youngster, we'll see whether or not if some of these youngsters will start to kind of come back down to earth a little bit. You usually do see that happen with a lot of these youngsters, maybe playing with a lot of confidence, but eventually they are gonna hit a bit of a speed bump, and we'll see whether this might be the game to do so against an Austin team that, like I said, it's been an average start to the start of the season for them. I'm not quite sure if Austin fans are happy with the fact that it's an average start to the season, consider they were hoping it will be a step up, especially on the attacking end, which the attacking end, besides the first game of the season, it hasn't been great whatsoever, and that's kind of be a little bit disappointing if you're an Austin fan, because I swear Austin fans does not want to see another similar year compared to last season, where even though they make it to the playoffs, that was probably one of the most boring teams to watch with how bad their attack was going forward. Now, moving on, we got LA Galaxy versus Sporting KC. So this, of course, is the other 9:30 p.m. Eastern, start 6:30 p.m. Pacific. The Galaxy have a 1-1-1 record, whereas Sporting KC have an 0-1-2 record. Now, obviously for the Galaxy, unlike where I talk about teams that maybe will rest their guys heading into the second leg, I think the Galaxy need to do so, even though they have a really long journey ahead of them in the middle of the week. Probably the longest out of any team that is involving the CONCACAF Champions Cup in the second leg, where they have to go all the way to Jamaica, going all the way to Kingston to play their second leg against Mount Pleasant. But the good news is they do have a comfortable advantage where maybe Greg Vanny will be just starting most of his kids and backup in that game as well. Now, coming into this one against a Sporting KC side that, I will say this, as much as I know Sporting KC is not going to be a good team this year, and I know they're not going to be a playoff team by any means necessary, they still look respectable. And I think that's all Sporting KC fans will ask about this team. They don't expect this team to compete for playoffs. This is year one of a long, painful rebuild that they're going through. But as long as they are looking respectful, I think they'll definitely take in. And it's been kind of a respectable start under Raphael Wiki to begin the season, even if they haven't won a single game. And we'll see whether or not they can do so against a Galaxy side that has just been very inconsistent this season. There's been times where the attack has been good, and there's times where their attack has been absolutely horrendous and frustrating to see. In fact, the game against Mount Pleasant, I think that game kind of just sums up the Galaxy in general, because while the attack for the most part was pretty good in that game, there was so many missed chances in that game, and especially for Jacques Claus, that was probably one of the most nightmare game that I've ever seen an individual player has ever had, with all those missed chances, and then of course the disallowed goal that we saw in the second half because he handballed it on development play. I mean, it couldn't get any worse for a player in terms of goal scoring in front as what Jacques Claus had in that game. Now, moving on, going to the other side of LA, I'm seeing LAFC taking on St. Louis, as this is the only game that starts at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. LAFC have a 3-0-0 record, whereas St. Louis have an 0-1-2 record. And in terms of the all-time meaning, 4-2-0 in favor of LAFC. So on paper, this looks like it's an easy win for LAFC. But remember, LAFC have to face against Alajuelense in the middle of the week. That two-leg affair is far from the decisive. In fact, they need to get a result against Alajuelense. They potentially need to win that one as well. So maybe Marco Santos might be resting some of his guys in this one, and probably can afford to do so and still get a result against this St. Louis side. That the effort is definitely there for St. Louis. I'll say the same about Sporting KC as the same with St. Louis, where the effort is definitely there with this team, but the talent is definitely not there, especially on the attacking, and they're still struggling a lot on the attack. Obviously, big part of that is because the loss of Joao Klaus is really heavily effective, and also Leuven not being there as the creative player, which as I said in the News of the Week episode, I definitely want to say my thoughts and prayers and my condolence for Edouard Leuven and also his family in terms of the difficult situation that he has to deal with his recent wife recently passed away because of cancer. So yeah, for St. Louis, obviously, we'll see whether or not maybe they might use that as a rally cry to trying to get things going, because yeah, they'll need every bit of it against an LAFC team that looks like a pretty much a machine so far in the beginning of the season, and had a little bit of a setback in that game against Alajuelense. Now, moving on, we got New England versus FC Cincinnati. So Houston is the team that I mentioned. Well, actually, I didn't mention before. Houston was actually one of the two teams that only played two games in the beginning of the season, because New England and the Houston Dynamo couldn't play earlier last week because of weather. Well, now New England will finally get a chance to play their home opener against FC Cincinnati. 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific is their start. New England still looking for their first win under Marco where Cincinnati, they got that big win against Tigres in the middle of the week in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. A very unexpected win as well, because no one would have thought that they would do that well against Tigres in the first leg, especially with a lot of Cincinnati fans didn't have a lot of expectation that they were going to do so well. Now, obviously, as much as they have that commanding lead, I'm pretty sure Pat Nolan will think that, yeah, we can't afford to really not put our strongest team, and maybe we might also rest some of our guys, especially we talk about going down to Mexico, always a tough place to do, but already mentioned the fact that of all the venue that is probably the toughest place to get a resort, and the place that is just the most hostile environment that an MLS team has to enter down in Mexico. It's none other than Alvocon. I mean, this is why I said that even with Cincinnati winning against Tigres 3-0, I don't think that two-legged affair is done by any means necessary, because I'm pretty sure even with the 3-0 deficit that Tigres had, that Alvocon crowd is going to show up, and they're going to rally their team and hope to create an incredible comeback as well. So for Cincinnati, again, they got to realize that that's a game that they need to still stay focused, but at the same time they're also going to have to focus on this one as well, and especially for New England, maybe they can finally get something going with the way that they like the Houston Dynamo didn't play in last week. Maybe this might be an extra chance for Marko Mitrovic to have an extra training session to just really kind of get things going with this team. So far, the philosophy that he's trying to preach to this team has just not worked whatsoever. But with that extra week of training, we'll see maybe that it might finally hum along, and especially being the home opener as well. Maybe they'll definitely look better in this game against the Cincinnati team that probably already have one eye in terms of what we saw in the CONCACAF Champions Cup that is in a couple of days. Speaking of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, so for the Vancouver Whitecaps, they also are going to be playing in the second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but unlike FC Cincinnati, they have a massive hole to dig out against the Seattle Sounders. Not only down 3-0 in the aggregate score, but they need to score 4 goals on the roll without a reply to win that two-legged affair. Now, because of that, maybe Jasper Sorensen might feel like that CONCACAF Champions Cup dream of them getting back to the final and finish the job that was left undone last season might be a pipe dream right now. So maybe now they're going to be focused more on league play. And I say before, for Minnesota, they get the advantage in terms of playing these two teams that are in the Concacaf Champions Cup and maybe rest some of their guys. Well, we didn't really quite see it against Nashville SC, and I don't think we're going to see it again in this game against Vancouver. In fact, yeah, this is probably not the best time for Minnesota to face against a Vancouver team that I expect this Vancouver team to be very angry coming into this one. It was just a very frustrating performance that they had against the Sounders in the Concacaf Champions Cup. So yeah, they're definitely going to be feeling that anger and trying to take it out on the Minnesota, the team that they did finally lose their first game under Cam Knowles in the last one against Nashville, and it was pretty clear that last game against Nashville, it just kind of shows you that as much as Minnesota is still a decent team in the West, they're not really a team that I think is going to consider to be a real contender, especially the fact that they just don't have the talent to do so. Now that of course can all change because this potentially can finally be the debut of James Rodriguez, and this is the out as the James Rodriguez versus Thomas Muller showdown. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see the two former Bayern Munich players face against each other in that one. But nevertheless, this game will start at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 6-5-4 in favor of Minnesota. Last time Minnesota did play against Vancouver, they parked the bus against Vancouver. They literally put 10 men behind the box and Urk 0-0 resort. I don't know if they're gonna do that again in this one because again, for Cam Nolan's the whole point of this season is that they get rid of that style of just kind of parking the bus, even though they kind of did a little bit of that against Nashville. They want to be more aggressive going forward, and I think this might be the same case again, even though again it's gonna be tough. Like I said, Minnesota has just such a tough start to the season. It's very easy to judge this team based on the beginning of the season and how things have gone, because they how they gone as we usually see. But as I said before, I don't think that could be the case, especially with just how tough of a schedule they have. They have by far probably the toughest schedule out of any team to start the season, and they continue in this game against a potentially a very angry Vancouver Whitecaps team in this one as well. And then last but not least is the Sunday night soccer game, and I would have never thought that a Sunday night soccer game between the San Jose Earthquakes and the Seattle Sounders is must watch TV. In fact, in the beginning of this season, I just think when I found this as a Sunday night soccer game, I guess the meaning of this game is probably because of the Heritage Cup that nobody really heard about, but it's still a thing. I mean, when the Quakes play against the Sounders, they definitely play for the Heritage Club, but now it seems like when you look at how the beginning of the season, I mean, for the San Jose Earthquakes, I mentioned before that I do think that this team look like they're for real. If they can win this game, then I do think they're for real. I really think that this is not a fluke anymore. Even if they have a pretty easy start to the schedule, and especially the biggest surprise I think with the Quakes in the beginning of the season has to be their defense. I mean, I definitely did not expect this from the beginning of the season that their defense still have yet to concede a goal to begin the season, and this is considered last season their defense was among the worst in the league as well. I didn't think that this would be the way that how the beginning of the season is. Now, obviously, this is going to be even a more tougher task. Though, again, if you're the Sounders, we'll see whether they maybe rest some of their guys. I mean, I just like Vancouver. I think Brian Schmitzer can afford to not really rest some of his guys and still do well in their second leg because they built up such a commanding lead in that game, and now they get a chance to play at home. Well, I say home. It's not really home. It's more of a neutral venue. They're going to be playing on the other side of Washington State in Spokane. That is, but they definitely have a huge advantage where maybe they might not have to worry about playing entirely their starter and able to get the resort as well. But either way, this should be a very fun, exciting Sunday night soccer game. I mean, we have some good ones in the past. Of course, the best one is the Florida Derby that we had. The last game, I thought it was probably going to be a bit of a dud, but it turns out to actually be a pretty good game, and it ends up in a bit of a surprise as well. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if this can continue for the Quakes in terms of being probably one, if not the biggest surprise package in the beginning of the season. If you would have told me in the beginning of the season that this team would start the season winning 3 games in a row, and yet to concede a goal, and become one of only 2 teams to have yet to concede a goal so far to begin the season, I would have not believed you whatsoever. I would have think that that feels like an absolute pipe dream, but here we are. San Jose Earthquakes is 3-0 and yet to concede a goal. And I do think that eventually they will concede a goal. Maybe this might be the game to do so, because this is probably the game where they face the most ferocious attack out of the first 3 opponent that they have to face. But you got to also remember the fact that I am kind of also cautiously optimistic that the Quakes are going to get something out of this game, not just because of the fact that I do start believe a little bit of this team after their start that they have, but also the fact that they for whatever reason tends to have a very good record against the Seattle Sounders. In fact, they haven't not lost to the Seattle Sounder at home in quite some while. And I mentioned before how it's kind of weird that a couple of years ago it was the other way around, where the Seattle Sounder just simply owned the San Jose Earthquakes. They had like a 15-game unbeaten run against the Quakes, and now it's just the other way around. It's just that Seattle, for some reason, have had their struggle against the Quakes. They did finally get their first win against the Quakes, I think, last year at Lumen Field. But when it comes to playing at PayPal Park, they have had their struggle when it comes still able to get the resort against the San Jose Earthquake. So yeah, either way, I'm very excited to see how this season begin, and I'm kind of happy for once that the Quakes are not actually a laughing stock in this league right now, and I'm just gonna enjoy this ride, because I don't know how long it's gonna last. I don't know if it's gonna be sustainable whatsoever. But one thing for sure, like I said, they can win this game. I think that will not only send a message to the rest of the league that maybe this team is for real, but it feels like the Bruce Arena second year magic is once again working with this team. There's just something about Bruce Arena of his second year magic. He did the same thing with the New England Revolution, where in that second year they won the Sapporo Shield and ended up with at that point the best points total ever in MLS history. And I'm not saying that that could happen again with the Quakes. I doubt that that would happen, but he's definitely working magic that I definitely did not anticipate it, that of course is the case, especially with you when you look at some of the subtraction that they had this offseason, and the fact that they pretty much did nothing with their team, which was feel like that is always a recipe for disaster when you have a team that basically does nothing in the offseason, not improving their team whatsoever. Because when you do that, you're probably going to get worse rather than getting better compared to all the other moves that teams make. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview of all of these games. Again, I'm going to try my best in terms of watching these games. I know for most of them, I'll probably have to rely on highlights in terms of watching these games, that is. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these games and your prediction for these games as well. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.